and told me that announcing what drink you'd order wasn't done. One always said simply a drink at the bar downstairs, and then he would tuck me in bed and get me a Burberry scarf, durable and stylishly understated. Good enough for the Queen, it should be good enough for me, and then we could prop up in bed and begin our more serious talk. If I thought of the right questions, he promised to give honest answers and, what? Everything would be known between someone who was about to turn 22 and the older man she was infatuated with, who was 44, all in the honorable cause of the young woman's enlightenment, so she would no longer make the mistakes she had made, might continue to make, if someone, Neil, the right person, didn't intervene. Italics provide a wonderful advantage. You see right away that the words are in a rush. When something exists at a slant, you can't help but consider irony. I became something of an overnight sensation when I was 21 for an interview I gave the New York Times, in which I, one of that year's summa cum laude Harvard graduates, disparaged my Ivy League education at graduation in the presence of President Jimmy Carter and stated my intentions to drop out and move to a farm in Vermont. Neil, a Barnard professor, had been hired to elucidate the issue of my generation's dissatisfaction with the establishment, writing a piece for the Times in which he contextualized my angst by quoting Proust, Rilke, Mallarmé, and Donald Barthelme. Then, though it had not been implied in the assignment, he concluded the piece by offering me a return to the old ways with the facetious proposal of marriage. I dropped him a note when I read it, saying I'd let him know my answer soon. I didn't get it. The ironies within ironies, certainly not the fact that he was only sending up a speculative thought balloon that I mistook for an advertising dirigible. At the time this relationship began, I had been living in a tiny town in Vermont with a man named Benjamin Greenblatt, who had graduated from Juilliard and gone to work on a dairy farm, doing chores, growing and canning vegetables, and milking goats to make cheese. A fisherman, a wanderer, a hiker, a sometimes poet, a bass player. By the time I met Neil, though, the novelty of living in the country had worn off, and I was tired of trying to learn to play the pump organ so I could accompany Ben singing lyrics he wrote on napkins and notepads or took down in shorthand on the palm of his hand. I'd had a year-long bellyache I didn't think was metaphorical, and had finally been referred by a doctor in Burlington to an OB-GYN, courtesy of my stepfather's intervention, in New York. The day I met Neil, I had almost signed with a literary agent who'd contacted me after the Times piece, and was scheduled, after lunch, to go to the studio of a photographer at the Gulf and Western building near Columbus Circle. There was instant chemistry between Neil and me, and the presence of the section editor, who was with us that afternoon, was as annoying as a soggy cocktail napkin. I went to the photographer's studio. The agent wanted me to have good photographs in hand. I didn't think about the fact that she gave me no writing assignment. Then met Neil at the place he'd written inside the matchbook, Grand Central. Not anywhere specific, just G Central. He did not mention what time I should be there. I imagined he must know how long it would take to be photographed. When it was over, I rode the subway, good instructions from the photographer, and entered the station. I scanned the huge space, then stood by the information booth, having decided on the most predictable meeting place. Eventually he came toward me, smiling, carrying a bag that held 2 chocolate cupcakes. The hotel key was already in his pocket. I was young and I wasn't used to being secretive with my women friends. Some met us later that week for coffee. I lied to Ben and told him I needed to rest in the city before I could travel. During those hectic few days, my friend Ruby came over to a store where Neil was looking for old jazz albums, and afterwards the 3 of us went to Washington Square and sat on a bench and drank Cokes. Krista, who had gone to grade school with me and worked for a brokerage firm in the city, went to Mary Boone with us and looked at paintings. Later, when he and I started seeing each other, I found out that the editor who'd been at lunch had called Neil the next day, saying she had an extra ticket to hear Spalding Gray. "What do you want me to do?" he would eventually say to me.